The Canadian credit bubble is imploding and people are taking over 60% losses, guys, on houses. We're going to get into one right away now that is in Kamloops. And guess what? This house was sold for $1.7 million. It's a really nice house. It's on a huge lot, beautiful views. And now I know for a fact this has been sold for less than $1 million. So guess what? It's a 42% loss. And guess what? Inflation adjusted, you're talking well over 60%, because again, 2022 to 2024, with inflation and the decline of people's purchasing power, they have lost over 60%. It's just absolutely crazy. So that's what's happening. And we've just had household debt hit $3 trillion for the first time ever in Canada, and the warning signs are still there that this credit bubble is actually imploding, despite the alarming statistics here that credit continues to grow and grow and grow in Canada. So we'll get into it. So Canadian household debt is back, but a little different this time. Statistics Canada StatCan data shows households owed more than $3 trillion in September, a new record high. Both mortgage and consumer credit growth accelerated, the latter at a faster pace, an unusual trend that indicates households are gobbling up credit, but less of it's for housing these days, which again is a warning sign when most of this is built on mortgage debt, and that is in fact the housing bubble. All the fundamentals just are now coming to head with the housing bubble. So here it is, Canadian household debt outstanding at institutional lenders. These are all systemic banks, of course. So you can see here how it started to go parabolic around 2003, 2004. That was when this bubble got started. It left the trend and started growing at an unsustainable pace. And when we hit into the mania, which is why you might ask, this channel is called Market Mania. Is it because this channel was founded during that mania phase? I was one of the only people coming out and saying, this is completely insane. This is not going to end well. And guess what? Here we are today. So basically you can see 2.48 trillion around May 2021, and now it's over $3 trillion. So you've seen a massive growth of like around 20% just in the past couple of years. In the past 3-4 years, you've seen this happen. So it's completely insane what's going on. So Canadian household debt is once again accelerating to new highs. Household debt grew 0.4%, and we're going to get onto in a minute HELOC growth. Again, the debt growth of HELOC is once again on the rise. Not a good sign when that is variable. So it rose 11.5 billion to 3 trillion in September. And that surpasses, guys, guess what? All the loan loss provisions of the banks. You know, we've talked about this before, but the banks are in an extremely risky position right now with all this debt growth. And this is all when it's obvious to us that they should be pulling back on lending. And guess what? They're just saying, hey, have you got any more risky borrowers that we can lend money to? Because we're happy to do that. It's just really unbelievable. So Canadian mortgage borrowing accelerates, but remains a smaller share of borrowing. And that's what they show on this chart. So if you look at this chart here, the blue line is residential mortgages. And you can see the growth of that has really slowed, which is what you would expect to see with the housing bubble imploding. And obviously the fact that more and more people are not taking on mortgages, you're not having new people come into the housing market. Number one, they can't afford it. And number two, they can't afford it. And you can also see here that consumer debt is actually on the rise. That's starting to rise, which is never a good thing, because guess what? What's that made out of? That's made out of the more risky, higher interest loans like credit lines, credit card debt, all those type of things. So non-mortgage credit gained more ground as households racked up more consumer debt like credit card balances. The segment advanced 0.5%, $4.2 billion. I mean, this is unbelievable when you really think about this. Is just in a month. It's just unbelievable when you really think about how much these loan loss provisions are. And people say, oh, the banks are really secure. They're really solid. Yeah, okay. So that's at $776 $26 billion. I mean, that is just crazy. An uptick to insolvencies and rising unemployment indicates this is likely more people borrowing to make ends meet than financing. So again, you're seeing people borrow because they can't afford stuff. It's not like they're going out and buying, as it says here, a Skidoo, or they're buying a new car, or they're doing anything like that. They're just borrowing because they're really screwed. They're completely screwed. And you see this as well with home equity lines of credit, which is never a good sign when you've got home values in a lot of places that are declining. More and more people are going into their home equity line of credit. There is so much avenues available to Canadians in terms of credit. It takes a long time to actually hit the market that it's going to instill fear in the market. Because guess what? People are just borrowing. They're utilizing all the different lines of credit that they have, which is many and plenty, especially if they own an asset. So it takes a long time. So Canadian HELOC debt hits the highest level in nearly 2 years. And by the way, guys, we hit 3 trillion. You know, that's like nearly 25% more than the actual size of the economy, which, as you can see here, is 2.4 trillion. Because as you can see here, it's 2.14 trillion. You can't really see it because it's slightly off the screen, but you can just Google this, 2.14 trillion, and guess what? 3 trillion is where you have household debt right now, which is just completely insane. So anyway, back to the HELOC. Canadian households are diving back into HELOC debt after an extended break. Households drove their balances 0.4%, up 720 million, which is a drop in the ocean compared to the non-mortgage debt numbers that include things like this, higher to 170 billion. And again, compared to the non-mortgage debt and the mortgage debt, that is a drop in the ocean. This represents a 3% plus 5 billion increase compared to last year, with the balance now at the highest level since November 2022. So again, you can see on this chart, this is the annual growth rate of home equity lines of credit. And you can see it was really muted and it was actually going negative, which is really interesting. And now it's starting to go higher and higher again. And again, this is just really a sign of distress. And when you actually look at non-mortgage debt, well, guess what? Where are the delinquencies actually the highest for this? Well, it's going to shock you and surprise you, because Equifax's last report, which is super laggy, and it came out end of August, and that was for Q2, I believe. So just completely insane. But never mind that. It was Alberta. It was Alberta with the highest delinquency rate on non-mortgage credit. So just bear that in mind, because the number is staggering. And it's also Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton, Fort McMurray, those typical places where people actually hold the highest amounts of non-mortgage debt and where the delinquencies are also the highest. So it doesn't matter if you're a homeowner or you're a renter in those places. Those are some of the housing markets that we've seen go against all the fundamentals for the past couple of years, because there was a narrative, everybody's moving to Alberta. The narrative temporarily for a while was, oh, oil is over $100. That means the economy is doing fantastic in Alberta. And then, you know, notice how it flipped to then, oh, it's everybody moving to Alberta. I just love it because people come up with these narratives, and a lot of people just always try and relate it to a narrative. And I just see it all the time in trading as well, where you have price swings and they have nothing to do with narrative. They have more just to do with simple patterns of human emotion. And that's why it's so predictable, because humans are herd animals and they are predictable. If you just don't follow the herd, then generally, guess what? You're going to be making good decisions just based on doing that alone. I mean, I've trained my mind now where I see people going one way, I want to go the opposite way automatically, because I don't want to do what the herd is doing, because most of the time they're just walking and marching straight off a cliff altogether. So everything that's happening here with debt is painting a terrible picture for the banking system, because all of this debt, all of the debt picture and the ability of the consumer to repay that debt, it all rests on the back of the banking system and indirectly also also the government through things like the CMHC and them backing all these mortgage insurers. And then that rests on who? The taxpayer. So it's just a completely rigged system. Realize that. There's insane amounts of fraud, which during the pandemic, there was massive amounts of fraud, which people don't talk about. And all that will come to fruition as this thing implodes, which it currently is. So anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching. And if you want to watch another really great video, check out this video here. Click the link here if you want to help support the channel and get a VPN. It's a win-win. You get a great VPN, same VPN as I use, and it also helps support the channel. So anyway, guys, I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.